Washington, legislation surrounding cybersecurity could face delays due to the looming budget cuts. Last month, President Obama issued an executive order to boost cybersecurity amid reports of widespread hacking targeting American companies. While the budget cuts would be split evenly between defense and domestic programs, it is still unclear how much they will affect those cybersecurity efforts. Joining me now to talk about this is Congressman Mike Rogers, chairman of the House Intelligence Committee. Now, welcome back to Bloomberg West.
Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you here on a beautiful day.
That's gorgeous.
Of all days.
You've been holding back on us here in the city. This is nice.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But, you know, just as the president is calling for, you know, increased efforts on cybersecurity for legislation, now these looming budget cuts, how could this impact cybersecurity resources?
Well, the good news is we've been stacking up on the cybersecurity threat level here in the last couple of years. And stacking up, I mean we've been putting more resources to the development of our ability to protect government networks. And so what the president did in the executive order is a good first step. And what we want to do is just be able to share information with the private sector so it won't be a huge cost so that they can protect their own networks. You know, as the chairman of the Intelligence Committee, I'm beating on the 16 agencies to go and find out what are our adversaries doing to try to harm the United States or our allies. We get that information, and what we want to do is share it with the private sector so they can protect their own networks. We think that's a good deal, a nice bargain. It doesn't cost them hardly anything.
But aside from that, couldn't the budget cuts impact the Pentagon, impact the Department of Homeland Security, and impact overall cybersecurity efforts?
It can, and one of the things that was harmful about the way we did it, it wasn't the amount of money. It only works out to 2 cents across the entire budget on the dollar spent, 2 cents. I don't think too many of your viewers believe that we can't find 2 cents on the dollar in reforms in Washington, D.C. We can do this. The problem is they focused it out over 7 months, and they did a lot of it across the line in defense spending, meaning some of it could be 13, 14, 15 cents on the dollar over 7 months. That gets into operations. So what we're saying is, and I think you'll see a bill this week or next week, we're going to pass it to give flexibility so that we can have flexibility. In other words, you won't have to say that the carrier group won't leave port because we don't have the money. You get to make those decisions, find other cuts so that the carrier group can meet that priority, which we think it is a priority to get out underway.
So what operations could potentially be impacted?
Well, it's across the board. So we know that intelligence folks under its current configuration now will probably see furloughs. I've seen estimates as high as 11,000 will get furloughs. Now, the intelligence business is a little different, including cyber, because it's not huge. It's not as big as Department of Defense. It's a smaller subset. So that does have a real impact on their ability to move forward on certain operations, and we want to protect that. Given the flexibility, this isn't a problem. Without the flexibility, I think it could be a problem.
So let's talk about your cybersecurity bill and what kind of progress has been made in your discussions with the White House.
Yeah, good. We've had great conversations about how we get closer on our position. So it's the only bipartisan cyber bill that's passed a committee in a bipartisan way, passed the House of Representatives, and went to the Senate. So we think we have a great start. And we have great coalition support. Industry is behind this bill, the high-tech industry, the financial services industry, all on the same bill. That's hard to do. So we think we found that sweet spot, if you will, between allowing businesses to protect their own networks and protecting privacy. We think we found it. We think that we're well underway to getting this done this year.
What specifically are you making progress on?
Privacy is something called minimization. So what we want to do is we really don't want to be dealing with Americans' personal identifying information when it comes, through information sharing or their PII. And so what we're doing is trying to find the right language to make sure that the intelligence community can use that cyber threat information in a pattern that they can use to help prevent attacks or prevent economic espionage in a way that doesn't compromise someone's personal identification information. We think we can do that. We think that's what I think the nature of the discussions are. And then who's in charge of it? How does it work? Is it Department of Homeland Security? Is it the FBI? Is it the National Security Agency? And I think the conversations are going in the right direction. I feel much more optimistic this year than I did last year. And the fact that, the New York Times, the Washington Post were hacked, I think has been helpful in the sense that people are now talking about it in a different way, and that's helpful.
So how close would you say you are to a deal?
Oh, that's a great question, Emily. I think that we are closer than people think, but we're not there yet. We haven't traded language, you know, the exact language.
Reportedly, you said earlier today that you are not that far apart, in fact, very close. You know, would you...
Well, what I meant on the issues this time, you know, when we first started this debate, we were at opposite ends of the spectrum. You know, we've narrowed that. So now we're in conversations about what language would look like on minimization, you know, protecting privacy to make sure that people believe it's fair and safe, and who is in charge of the information and how it works. So we've got conversations. We don't have language. And in legislative parlance, you know, that's still a long way to go.
Okay.
But it is, we feel very confident that a bill will pass the House in April, and that means that I can expect that we could finish up those conversations that will lead to negotiations that will lead us to the passage of a bill.
Okay. Now, since you and I last spoke, in just a couple of weeks, there have been hack attacks from Eastern Europe on Apple, Facebook, and Microsoft. Mandiant came out with this report that says the Chinese military has been hacking, you know, 140 companies around the world. At the same time, the Chinese government has come out saying that the United States hacks Chinese military websites like 100,000 times a month. You know, how do you respond to that? I mean, is that true?
First of all, it tells you that we've got their attention. A good defense is a good offense, right? Or a good offense is a good defense, as they say. And what we think is happening is that they were caught unawares about how aggressive we have been about the publicity of these businesses getting hacked by the Chinese government, and the fact that the Mandiant report not only just identified the Chinese government, but specific units within the Chinese government. I think that caught them off guard, and I think their response was, well, they're attacking us. I will guarantee you the United States military intelligence and civilian intelligence units, the groups that I oversee, we do not use those government agencies to steal intellectual property from Chinese businesses and repurpose it and give it to American businesses to compete. We don't do it.
But we do have our own offense.
Well, we conduct, I mean, I'm the chairman of intelligence. It would be wrong for me to be against espionage activities. Government to government has been happening since George Washington sent Nathan Hale into New York City to find out what the British were doing. And we've been trying to get that advantage on the battlefield ever since. And so from government to government espionage, it happens, it goes on, all governments participate in it to some degree or another. This is something so very different. We have never seen a nation state dedicate its resources to stealing private intellectual property to bring back, to create businesses, to compete against those companies in a global market. We've never seen that before, and it's happening at a breathtaking pace. I mean, breathtaking pace. So you see all this recent activity and the publicity. That's because most companies realize now that there's, you know, two companies left in the world, those who have been hacked and know it, and those who have been hacked and don't know it, and that they're feeling more comfortable in talking about the threat that they're seeing, the cyber threat that they're seeing, in the volume that they're seeing it in, and really what it means to our future economic prosperity in the United States.
So if at the same time we're building our offense and our defense and hackers are at the same time becoming more sophisticated, how does this end? Can it end? I
believe it can. And first of all, if we have direct bilateral relationships and discussions with the Chinese, I think our first three issues on any further discussions on bilateral trade ought to be cyber, cyber, and cyber. I mean, it's overwhelming. The water's coming over the bow of the boat. We have to deal with it now, or we're going to have a horrible problem. And if they want to be great international players in the international global economic market, you can't act like a thief in the night. So we just need to let them understand that there will be consequences for their stealing intellectual property. I think that's a good way and a framework that we can start those discussions. I have a whole series of other things I'd like to do that are more aggressive to let them know we're serious about this. And secondly, we have to start protecting our own networks. And we do that not by the government trying to protect the private sector networks. We're never going to be able to do that. And candidly, I don't think we should do that. But we should be able to share what we know that we've collected in a classified way are the threats, share it with the private sector so they can protect their own networks. And I think if we do those two things simultaneously, we can right this ship. If we don't, the Russians, the Chinese, the Iranians, other nations are going to get in on an event that means free research and development, a prosperous economy, doesn't cost them a dime, and they've stolen every bit of it. I think that's a horrible message to send.
So many pressing issues here. We will continue to follow progress on potential legislation. Chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, Mike Rogers, thanks so much for joining us today on Bloomberg West. Great to have you here.
Thanks for having me.